In that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
There are many types of evidence. For the sake of this unit, we will examine the following three, since they are the types most likely to be at a crime scene. Number 1, real or physical evidence. Number 2, testamentary or direct evidence. And number 3, circumstantial or indirect evidence.
One of the most important aspects of any crime scene is the physical evidence it produces. The goal of crime scene investigators is to find evidence that will link a suspect to the crime and eventually lead to solving the case. Depending on the type of crime, almost anything could be considered physical evidence. The only real requirement is that it aids in the process of fulfilling the burden of proof. If the chain of custody reveals any periods that are questionable, the evidence could be considered compromised and be deemed inadmissible in a court of law.
Going through the Earth's sedimentary layers hundreds of millions of years back in time, geologists have also discovered other ice ages.
The channeled scabland is one of the most fascinating landscapes, and the tremendous catastrophic floods were probably the most spectacular things that happened on the planet.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Johnson. Today we are discussing potassium-argon dating. This type of dating method, though the numbers are bigger in potassium-argon dating, it has the exact same problems that carbon dating does. Now carbon dating we discussed in the other video decays back to nitrogen and has a half-life of roughly 5,730 years. It's argued a little bit on the numbers, it doesn't matter. But potassium slowly decays into argon at a rate of 1.3 billion years. Now I may question the methods that they use to know that, but I'll go ahead and give that to them. I'm not going to argue it. So just understand that the following methods I'm going to describe are based on potassium samples, and I'm not arguing the decay rate, okay? It says as much as 80% of the potassium in a small sample of iron meteorite can be removed by distilled water in 4.5 hours. Well, if you find out that 80% of your sample can be removed by water in a matter of hours, how can you possibly trust that your sample has not been contaminated for millions and billions of years? That is quite simply absurd to assume that, and a very serious gamble if you're relying on that for accurate dates. In conventional interpretation of potassium to argon age data, it is common to discard ages. Let me read that again. It is common to discard ages which are substantially too high or too low compared with the rest of the group or with the available data such as the geologic time scale. That is exactly my point. Okay? What that means is that they are getting ages which vary from their preconceived evolutionary dates, oftentimes based off the geologic column, which is made up by pure imagination. We're going to cover that in another video. If they get a date that varies, instead of doing what would be scientific and altering the theory based on the evidence, they instead throw out the evidence until it matches their theory. I quoted this in the carbon dating videos, this following quote I'm going to give you, and I'll quote it again. It says, if a C14 date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. And if it is completely out of date, we just drop it. You see, they're doing the same things with the different radiometric dating. If it goes against their preconceived theory of how old they think it should be, they just throw it out. So why don't you just give it a number? Why are you wasting all this time and money to do all these things you're trying to call science when all you're doing is guessing? Just, give it a number that you think it is and just call it that. So they have to admit one of two things. Either A, the dating methods are inaccurate, by this, or B, they're altering the data to fit their preconceived theory. Now, they don't want to admit either of those, but they have to have something to say that the Earth is millions of years old, don't they? Because what would we replace it with if we didn't have this? That's exactly my point. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about here. The KBS tuff was dated using potassium to argon dating at 212 to 230 million years old. This is recorded in Nature. It's recorded in a lot of different major magazines at the time, the major mainstream science magazines. Everybody agreed this was 212 million years old. Tuff is consolidated volcanic ash, okay? The theory is that when a volcano erupts, hot sediments shoot out and all the gas escapes. Argon is gas, so in theory, all the gas escapes and the clock for potassium is reset to 0. So basically they assume they've got a fresh potassium deposit in a layer of tuff that'll give them historical markers to date back millions of years. So the KBS tuff was named after Kay Berenzenmeier, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, because she was doing research on it at the time, and it's located east of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya. You can look that up on a map if you'd like. In the 1970s, all the evolutionists agreed that the KBS tuff is 212 to 230 million years old using potassium-argon dating. Until 2 years later, Richard Leakey was digging under the KBS tuff, this is in 1972, and found a human skull. The skull is, this is number KNM-ER1470. This creates a problem because according to the evolution theory, this preconceived evolution theory, man wasn't on the Earth until 3 million years ago. They checked to see if someone had dug through the rock to bury it there, like somebody just set them up trying to trick them, but they determined it wasn't planted there. It couldn't have been possibly planted there. So what did they do? Well, since this is supposed to be science, and according to the scientific method, we would expect that they would alter the theory to match the evidence they found, right? Because that's what you would normally do. Wrong. That's not what they did. They instead went back and redated the KBS tuff because it's got to match their preconceived theory. You see how this works? This automatically, without any further information involved, tells us two things. One, they know full well the potassium-argon dating does not work properly. Okay? And two, they're dating things based on their preconceived evolution model, and if they find something that doesn't fit that model, they go back and change the evidence until it does fit the model. You see how this works? It's not based upon the evidence. The evidence is not driving the theory. The theory is driving their evidence. So they took 10 more samples, okay, and dated them again. Now keep in mind, the evolutionists had already dated the tuff many times, and it was agreed upon that it was 212 to 230 million years old. Now they came up with their new numbers. Late in 1974, Fitch, Miller, and Associates published the results of their revised study, a broad scatter of apparent ages from 10 different samplings ranging from 0.52 to 2.64 million years. Well, there's some things you need to consider. First of all, that's a long way down from 212 million. All right. Second, and that's 0.52 to 2, or 0.5 to 2.5 basically, is a 500% error margin. This is not an exact science by any means whatsoever. Third, they would never have redated this thing if Richard Leakey hadn't found that skull there. This proves my point exactly, that they're dating things based on their position in the geologic column, not based on the scientific method. Now, I could go through and give you a bunch of examples where they've dated with potassium argon, they've dated basalt, and they've gotten hundreds of thousands of years from dates of hundreds of thousands of years from recently erupted volcanoes, like in the past few decades. So it really doesn't matter, or it doesn't really work. But I don't think that going through those and showing those, it's not going to matter. The evolutionists definitely don't care.